Okay, we'll start with this. Very recently, Bob Arum talked about the possibility of a Dmitry Bivol versus Artur Beterbiev fight, and he said,
"We ain't doing a fight on DAZN. Nobody watches it."
he clearly has no intention of sending Artur over to the DAZN side of things.
One thing with Beterbiev is that now he is known to the public, and so many people have seen him. We ain't doing a fight on DAZN, which nobody watches.
Arum told BoxingScene.com shortly after Beterbiev knocked out Smith. Arum suggested one way to make the potential undisputed 175-pound title bout would be for Hearn to allow Bivol to fight on ESPN.
So again, we'll see. I think that when the time comes, even Eddie will have Bivol come over and fight Beterbiev for a big audience.
In the meantime, Arum believes Beterbiev's next fight will be against British contender Anthony Yarde in the fall at the O2 Arena in London.
Yarde and Beterbiev will fight in London. I talked this morning with Yarde's promoter, Frank Warren, who will be the co-promoter there. We're planning for a big night at the O2 Arena.
Artur Beterbiev himself stated post-fight that he wants the undisputed title fight with Dmitry Bivol. That's what he wants to do next. That is the more interesting situation, whereas Bob wants to keep things in network with his old buddy Frank Warren. Bob, who says nobody watches DAZN, nobody knows Dmitry Bivol, but they know Artur Beterbiev. They know Anthony Yarde. You know, Artur Beterbiev, he's based out of Canada, but the fight with Joe was in New York. And it was in New York for a reason. They staged it there in the hopes that those Long Islanders would show up and show out for their hometown hero, Joe Smith Jr., which they did. The majority of the audience in attendance for that fight were there supporting Joe, not Artur. And now you're talking about sending Artur over there to London, to Anthony Yarde's neck of the woods.
Same principle.
You're hoping the Londoners will show up and show out for their boy, Anthony Yarde.
Bob likes to say that nobody watches DAZN and nobody knows Dmitry Bivol.
But if that's true, the same must apply for Artur Beterbiev, it being that you're moving him around like a ping pong ball.
He signed the Top Rank back in February of 2019, 3 years ago.
In 3 years of fighting on the ESPN platform, has Top Rank turned Artur Beterbiev into a household name yet? Because you're always hearing Bob carry on these days about how the ESPN platform is a megaphone.
Says nobody watches DAZN but ESPN.
What about ESPN? Did Artur Beterbiev, fighting on ESPN for the last 3 years, turn him into a household name? Is he Julio Iglesias now?
What are you trying to convince me of? That he's more well-known than Dmitry Bivol, who just beat Canelo?
Canelo Alvarez, who draws more than anybody in this country. Canelo Alvarez, the cash cow of boxing in America. You're telling me that Artur Beterbiev is a more well-known guy than Dmitry, who beat him?
Get the fuck out of here.
That one victory over the cash cow of boxing here in America, Canelo Alvarez, Dmitry Bivol effectively introduced himself to very many American fight fans who were familiar with Canelo, the biggest draw in this sport in this part of the world.
That victory, Dmitry Bivol effectively introduced himself to the world.
Zerto Ramirez wants him. Bob Arum's own fighter, his own champion, Artur Beterbiev, wants him, but let Bob tell it. Nobody knows Dmitry and nobody watches DAZN.
He's not doing Artur any favors dragging this out.
Artur's no spring chicken. He's 37 going on 38 years old. He ain't got all the time in the world to see himself become an undisputed champion and make a splash, make that history. He really doesn't have all the time in the world. You think about Frank Warren, Anthony Yarde. Frank's not doing Anthony any favors.
We're about 6-7 months into the year of 2022.
Anthony Yarde hasn't fought yet, and it's conceivable that he won't fight until October, when this fight with Artur Beterbiev is supposed to go down. He will have been out of action for roughly 10 months, just 2 months short of a year.
Anthony Yarde was last in action in December of last year in the Lyndon Arthur rematch.
He won that rematch by way of knockout, the way I said he would win that rematch by way of knockout. But this situation...
Oh, it doesn't bode well for Anthony that they want to throw him in there with Artur when he hasn't fought all of this year.
Frank couldn't get this guy a tune-up fight, a warm-up fight, all of this year. We're 6 months into the year of 2022, and he couldn't get that guy a fight?
Hey, whose bright idea was it for Anthony to sit out most of this year collecting dust?
What the hell is that supposed to help him fight the likes of Artur Beterbiev? But that's the situation. That's what's going on. And we've known that's the situation. We've known that's what's going on since late last year, that this is what they wanted to do.
I think late last year, or at minimum early this year. We knew this is what they wanted to do.
They're holding up the undisputed title fight. That's what they're doing. And that's not necessarily in the best interests of an aging Artur Beterbiev, who's 37, going on 38 years old. That's not necessarily in the best interests of Anthony Yarde, who hasn't fought yet this year.
They're doing this in the best interests of themselves and their network.
Their network affiliates. Bob Arum will lambast Eddie Hearn.
He'll go as far as lambasting Dmitry Bivol as well.
Bivol can hold a WBA belt, but he is hardly attractive. The Canelo versus Bivol war dies. Canelo was probably the biggest draw in the U.S. at the box office, and that fight did horribly from gate to gate.
You think this is the first time that Bob poo-pooed all over a Bivol versus Beterbiev fight?
5 months ago, here on this channel, we talked about how Bob Arum was saying Dmitry Bivol is boring.
This was before the Canelo-Alvarez fight, obviously.
After the Canelo-Alvarez fight, he's still rationalizing why Dmitry Bivol versus Artur Beterbiev isn't the fight to make. He's still cooking up reasons not to do that fight.
Because nobody knows Bivol, nobody watches DAZN, yada, yada, yada.
Nobody knows Bivol. You understand? If a fighter fights his fights on, I call it dark zone, nobody watches. And there's also nothing backing it up, because if they fight on ESPN or Heyman's guys fight on Showtime, at least there's a megaphone talking about the fight and the fighters.
Megaphone, he says. So how'd that megaphone work out for Artur Beterbiev after he unified titles with Alexander Vosdik 3 years ago? Is he a household name yet?
What do you think? This past weekend's unification fight is his first rodeo?
It's not. He was in a unification match 3 years ago with Vosdik. He's not a household name yet for having fought on ESPN. He still isn't a more well-known light heavyweight now than Dmitry Bivol. You think about Tyson Fury and how after the first Wilder fight, Tyson Fury jumped into bed with Top Rank. And you look at the gate receipts for Tyson Fury's fights.
Bob Arum loves to talk about how Eddie Hearn is frittering money away.
He's a joke. All he can do is write checks and give away money.
You mean like you did with Tyson Fury, so that he can bring in a whopping $882,000 at the gate for a fight?
How many millions did you pay Tyson Fury to fight Tom Schwartz? How many millions did it cost you when you paid him to fight Otto Wallin?
So that he could sell a whopping 3,577 tickets, generating nearly $1 million for a fight that costed you well in excess of that.
And this was all build-up for the second Wilder fight. The second Wilder fight, they also lost money on.
Per Top Rank's own Bruce Trempler, who stated Fury versus Wildergate was $19 million, and it still lost money because sales were low.
They were low due to piracy, but better still, Top Rank's fucked off a lot of money on Tyson Fury.
But he fucked off a lot of money trying to turn that guy into a household name here in America, only so that his very next fight could end up in the United Kingdom.
Well, that's where his last fight was, and that seems to be where his next fight's gonna be.
I don't know that Top Rank ever actually turned over a profit from any of the fights they staged involving Tyson Fury. The Otto Wallin fight, the Tom Schwartz fight, the second Wilder fight, the third.
I don't know that they ever made any money trying to promote that guy.
He's a joke. All he can do is write checks and give away money.
Give away money the same way you gave away money to Terrence Crawford?
You know, fighting on ESPN didn't help his profile either.
In America, ESPN is, in fact, a bigger platform than the DAZN platform. In America, ESPN is the biggest sports network in the country, and they really do have that many more subscribers than the DAZN platform does. The misconception, however, is that all of those subscribers are boxing fans.
No, they're not. The bulk of their viewership doesn't even come from boxing.
If it did, promoter Bob Arum wouldn't have lost all the money he lost promoting Terrence Crawford's fights. He's quoted as saying he's not a pay-per-view draw.
Before you stand on the pulpit telling everybody about how much money Eddie Hearn fucked off.
You've fucked off quite a bit of money and quite a bit of time yourself. Artur Beterbiev's been on your platform since early 2019. He's not a household name yet. You brought over Tyson Fury after the first Wilder fight, and all he did for you was lose money.
Leading up to the second fight, going into the third.
I don't know that Top Rank ever actually turned over a profit from promoting Tyson Fury. Not that it matters anymore, since he's going to be based out of the UK moving forward. And when it comes to Terrence Crawford, hey, they're Bob Arum's words, not mine. He lost money on all that guy's fights. So when he's now saying that ESPN is this megaphone. It might very well be the biggest sports network in the country, but it hasn't helped you turn your fighters into household names.
That's why Dmitry Bivol is a more well-known light heavyweight than Artur Beterbiev, even though he fights on an app.
Yeah, he just fought on an app against the biggest draw in boxing. He just fought on an app against the biggest draw in boxing in this country. Don't forget that part.
The truth.
Bob doesn't want to have to send Artur to DAZN. The only way he's willing to entertain that fight is if Dimitri is sent over to ESPN. And the problem is, Artur is not necessarily the A-side fighter to Dimitri.
He's not. Dimitri's more well known for beating the likes of Canelo Alvarez, and Dimitri has more options.
He has the option of fighting Zurdo Ramirez here in America. He has the option of facing Joshua Buatsi in the United Kingdom. He has the option of taking on former WBA super middleweight champion Callum Smith. This is all on the DAZN side of things. This is all on his side of the street, not including a Canelo Alvarez rematch.
He actually has more options on the app no one watches than your fighter does on ESPN.
Congratulations, Artur. You got yourself a third belt. What are you going to do now? They're going to fly you out to London so you can face Anthony Yarde, so then Anthony can sell the tickets.
They had him fight Joe in New York so that Joe's fans would buy the tickets. Now they're doing that with Anthony in London.
You're telling me 3 years after signing Artur Beterbiev, you haven't turned him into a ticket seller yet?
The biggest fight for Artur is Dimitri, but the biggest fight for Dimitri, it ain't even Artur.
It's actually Canelo.
Let that sink in.
I entertained this scenario ahead of this weekend's fight with Joe Smith Jr. for Artur. Should he beat Joe? And should he beat Anthony later on this year, if that fight ends up happening? What does he do after that? He's 37 going on 38 years old.
Top Rank don't want to admit that Dimitri Bivol's the biggest fight for that guy, and they ain't got no leverage on Dimitri.
Not right now. Not while he still is a matchroom fighter. And if you wanted to do that fight right now, by all rights, it should be Artur crossing over to DAZN, not the other way around.
But they don't want to do that fight right now.
They want to do the Yarde fight in order to keep up with the Joneses, in order to be able to compete with the DAZN platform. And they're not going to say that, but that's what it is. The biggest and best fight for Artur right now is not the Anthony Yarde fight. It is neither the more historical, more relevant fight for that fighter, or the biggest financial opportunity.
And if it's none of those things, then why do they want to do that fight as opposed to the Bivol fight?
I just told you. It's because they want to keep up with the Joneses. They have to compete. And in order to compete, they have to work together transatlantically, because DAZN is a global streaming platform. It's not just a US-based outfit or a UK-based outfit.
They've got to compete on all fronts, in the UK, in the US.
They have to work together. Do you honestly think Anthony Yarde is a bigger fight for Artur Beterbiev than Dimitri Bivol?
Bigger in what way?
Tunde Jahi likes his fighter's chances, saying Anthony Yarde will do to Artur Beterbiev what he did to Joe Smith.
No.
He being Artur Beterbiev this past weekend. In truth, it's not a bad fight. I've said that before. Both Anthony Yarde and Artur Beterbiev are punchers, and in that way, it has the same appeal. It is just as attractive a fight as a Joe Smith Jr. fight, though not as relevant, not as significant.
No.
Beterbiev versus Yarde will have a different aesthetic than what we saw this past weekend, because Anthony Yarde actually has the right base style for a pressure-based fighter, a pressure fighter. Anthony Yarde,
He's a boxer puncher.
boxer punchers tend to have a stylistic advantage over pressure fighters. They do, so long as they are on the level, the same level. And therein lies the dilemma for Anthony Yarde. While he might have the right base style for the job,
I don't think he's on the level.
we've been talking a lot about base styles lately here on the channel. The pure boxer versus the boxer puncher versus the pressure fighter versus the pure boxer, and which styles have which advantages over which other styles. But one thing we don't often talk about is when a guy's got the right base style for the job, he just ain't got all the ingredients. He just ain't on the level.
Let's say Artur Beterbiev's a A-level pressure fighter.
For argument's sake, let's say he's a A, maybe a A-, and let's say that Anthony, he's a B to a B- boxer puncher.
Well, yeah, he still has the right base style for the job, but he ain't got all the tools. He ain't got all the ingredients.
He is not competing at the same level as an Artur Beterbiev because, well, quite frankly, if he were, he wouldn't have got knocked out by Sergey Kovalev.
He would have finished the job in Chelyabinsk, Russia.
If he were competing on the same level as an Artur Beterbiev, he would have been crowned WBO champion on that day well over 2 years ago. If he were competing on the level of a Beterbiev or a Vozdik or a Bivol, I don't think Anthony's on the level. If he were, he wouldn't have got knocked out by Sergey Kovalev, who is not as durable a fighter as an Artur Beterbiev, not as much of a consummate professional between fights. We all know Sergey likes to drink.
Artur takes care of himself between fights. Sergey doesn't.
Anthony Yarde were competing on the same level as an Artur Beterbiev. He wouldn't have needed two fights for one decisive victory, one decisive win over Lyndon Arthur.
I picked him to win that rematch, by the way.
I'm picking him to lose this potential Beterbiev fight because while he has some of the right tools, he doesn't have all of them.
Anthony throws a short jab like Artur throws a short jab.
It's not a long, stiff stick, not a step jab like what you see from a Gennady Golovkin.
It's not tense like what you see from Joe Smith Jr.
It's not ever present, and Anthony Yarde relies on explosivity, being an ambush fighter.
That does involve some timing.
Anthony Yarde is a little faster than a Joe Smith Jr., little trickier.
And Anthony is a puncher, so he has power.
I think a fight between Artur Beterbiev and Anthony Yarde might last a little longer than a Joe Smith Jr. fight, though I do think it ends the same way. Anthony just doesn't have the strongest case.
It's hard to convince me you can deal with an Artur Beterbiev when you got knocked out by a past-it Sergey Kovalev.
If you were on the level of an Artur Beterbiev, well, you would have made it past a guy like that. You would have made it past a guy like Lyndon Arthur, a domestic-level guy, when you fought him the first time.
If Anthony's a better fighter than what we've seen so far, this would be the fight where he proves it.
So are you out there trusting him to do that 10 months into the year of 2022? As this fight is supposed to go down in October of this year, and Anthony ain't fought since December of last year.
We know that Artur just performed under the hot lights. He just got out there this past weekend.
But what about Anthony? What conscionable reason is there for Frank Warren to have not gotten this guy a fight the entirety of this year? Do you really want to have to shake off any bit of ring rust, any bit of cobwebs with a guy like Artur Beterbiev later on this year? They could have booked that guy a fight, and they didn't. He might have the right base style for the job, but at this time, I'm not convinced he's on the level.
If Artur's an A, Anthony's a B.
If Artur's a B, Anthony's a C. And the way that usually breaks down when a guy's got the right base style for the job, but he ain't on the level, oh, it can get interesting. It can.
Oh, yeah, he'll make the other guy work for it, but he'll still lose.
Because he's not on the level. And this past weekend, Artur showed us that he can move around when he's got to move around. He can do some punch picking of his own.
I like Artur in that fight.